Okay, so today we have some exciting upgrades for the old F250 Powerstoke. She's a little muddy. We have a gauge set from GlowShift. So I got this for Christmas a while ago. It's March like 12th or something now. So we're going to install our gauges. Now you can, if you go on their website, and I did pay for this, I'm not sponsored by GlowShift, you can pick the gauge pod here. Check this out. This is the pod. So you can choose the pod and then you can choose 3 gauges. I think the cost was around $300. I'll look it up and I'll show you the website and stuff. So I chose a transmission temperature gauge, a boost gauge, and a rear differential temperature gauge. Heat is usually the beginning of something failing. Okay, so you can see on the dash there, we've got fuel, temperature, engine temperature, oil pressure. We got a volt gauge, tach, and our RPM. So this has a ATS stage 2 built transmission, and I wanted to monitor the transmission temp. This truck spends a lot of time towing vehicles on the car trailer, great big boats. So I want to be able to monitor the transmission temp and the differential temp. Normally, if something's going to fail, you'll see the temp start to creep up. And then the boost gauge was just kind of more for fun for me. I'm going to keep it pretty stock, I think, unless I come and do a whole bunch of money, and then we'll start really going nuts. Here's our diff cover. We're going to remove this. What makes me nervous about this, there's a magnet stuck to my exhaust, is I had a Dodge 1500 years ago, and I was just trying to do some normal maintenance. I took the diff cover off to drain it, clean it out, reseal it, and refill it. When I pulled the cover off, a bunch of pieces come falling out, even though it wasn't making any wacky noises or anything. But let's just get to it and get this cover off and figure out where we're going to mount our bung. So let's see, there she is, and there's no metal floating. The ring gear doesn't look too bad. It's not leaking out of the pinion seal or anything, so that's good. I think we want our temperature sender to go in the lowest point of the diff so that it's always submerged in fluid, or at least as much as possible. So there's this option over here, but that's kind of a rounded part of the cover. I'm thinking we should go right here, right next to the ring gear. So let's see. So when this is on here, I think right there should be a safe bet. Yeah, I think like right here would be a pretty safe bet that it's going to be far enough away from the ring gear, but that it'll be submerged in fluid. Let's get a hole drilled in this thing and get ready to weld up this bung. Go with a little bit bigger bit, and then we'll try a step bit. Okay, there's a little bit bigger hole. Yeah, we're not quite there yet. I'll try and go through it this way. Now our bung fits, and this is, I'll spin this on here. This will be the final result once it's all assembled. Like that. Okay, so I put a couple bolts in it. I fit it on here. It's well away from the ring gear, and it should be submerged in fluid, so I think we can weld it up. I don't claim to be a welder. I'm probably gonna have to use some JB to make sure it's sealed. Oh, well, I didn't get it tacked. Well, we better brush that out. Try it again. Okay, so that time I started on the bung and worked my way down to the cover. Probably a little too hot, eh? This is probably like a 2-minute job for somebody that's a real welder. And feel free in the comments to be like, hey man, it was too hot, or it wasn't clean enough, or you should have done this. Because I'm not too good that I can't be taught, so feel free to reach out if you saw what I was doing here and why, or how it could have been maybe better. All right. And this is flux core wire. I would like to think I could weld this good enough so that I didn't have to go over it with JB to prevent any leaks, but yeah, that one got a little worse. A little bit more boogery than it was before. Okay, so here's what we got after the JB weld. I'm gonna clean this up right quick, and then I've been thinking about this. We need to build a bracket to kind of protect this. This truck never sees any off-road use, really, but in the rare instance, because this is so low on the diff, I want to make something that comes up here to protect it, you know, from a stump or a rock or something like that. So okay, now we'll sand it by hand, clean it up some more, make it look nicer. Alright, I think that's good enough for who it's for. Can't see it, which is usually what happens with the light in here. See what we can do here. Okay.
And you put the pieces on top, I think it'll be fine.
So here's what we wound up with for the diff cover. That's where we put our bung in. Alex is going to get it painted up. This is our bracket that's going to cover the sensor. So if we accidentally get off road a little bit, we're not breaking that sensor off and then leaking fluid everywhere. So that's the piece we made. Again, I'm not the greatest welder. I shouldn't even call myself a welder. I'm not the greatest person that's ever used a MIG welder. How's that? So yeah, you know, sticks and maybe some small rocks or something. That truck never gets off-road, so I doubt we'll ever need this. But with that sensor hanging out there, I wanted to make sure we had something over it like this. Alex is going to throw some primer on it, and then he's going to paint it flat black, and then we'll put it back on the truck. Okay, so we plumbed our T-fitting in here. Some new hose. This is probably less than desirable, and I'm going to put a 90 on here to come up, so it'll just follow. Now, one thing that's not so nice about this is the coil in this wire. I tried to heat it to get some of the curl out of it, but it hasn't really worked, so it'd be a real headache working on it, or working with it. So I tried the heat gun, and that didn't help the curl. Let's try and get it routed through here, and we'll try and uncurl it as we go, I guess. That's the only downside I've found so far with this kit is this hose for the boost pressure. What we're going to do is drill a hole here through that. We'll put a grommet in. We're going to have to route this line. There's already a zip tie there for the wipers. We got to make sure we have enough line to reach the gauge too. That would be worse than anything anymore. Okay, so we can tie it off there. Now we better make the boost gauge our first gauge in the pillar, because we only have about, well, we got more than 6 feet. I have just the right size grommet for that. Let's see. Okay. Now, if we can get our grommet in here. There we go. Okay, I think we're good to run the boost line through. to the interior. So I guess we just fit the end of it. And it fits fairly snug. Not super hard to push through. And hopefully there's plenty of it to go up the pillar. I forget how many feet they said. Keep going. This is our line right here. So we're not going to want to be anywhere near the steering shaft. So yeah, that was broke right there, but our new set goes over top of that. Let's see. Goes like this. So okay, so working with the gauge pod here on the A-pillar trim, it doesn't fit quite as well as what it probably should. It'll work. I wanted to paint it red, but I couldn't find any non-metallic red paint this color. I'll eventually paint it, I think, but we're gonna have to, I guess, man, I didn't really want to, but I think we're gonna have to drill individual holes for each of the gauges. Once it's all tight, it doesn't look like there's room in there for the wires and stuff to slide by if it was formed correctly. So I think it's going to take an individual hole for each one of the gauges. I mean, I've already drilled one hole in it, so I thought that there would be just enough room for the wires to slide by here. If it was formed like it should be, there's no real room. Yeah, if we're going to drill one hole, we might as well just drill all three, and we'll just have the wires come to the gauges. So we'll get set up to drill those right now. Yeah, we're gonna want to angle them this way. It's pretty easy. We just have to remove this plug right here for our line pressure. Oh, it's in there. We might have to get a 6-point socket on this. All right. So we got a little bit of thread tape on here, plus a little bit of aviation sealant. So let's see if we can get this started in the hole. I believe it was exactly the same size. It is good. So we'll thread this in here and we'll tighten it up.
Oh, I gave you the wrong ones?
You gave me the cutters, which is great, but I need the crimpers. The last thing I'm gonna do is fill this diff. I wanna make sure that the RTV and the cover sets up, so we'll get this. All right, this is our cover. So one bolt goes through down here. Yeah, the 13, I think, a full size one. Probably a little, I should be using the heat gun and not the torch. Yeah, it probably wouldn't hurt. I'm burning everything up with these, yeah. I'll tighten this last bolt in the meantime. Spin her in here. All right, so we just went for a test drive after the gauge install, and I'll show you the results. Here's the gauges. So the boost gauge is going to read 0, but you can change the color here. I just chose red because the red interior. I tied everything into the headlight switch, and they will dim when you turn on the headlights. I don't know if you could see that or not, but they do dim. So yeah, we're about 100 degrees on the trans temp and almost 110 on the differential temp there. You guys can see that. And then our trans temp gauge is right there. So overall, I'm pretty happy. And this thing did, let me shut the truck off. Okay, so when you power them up, they do sweep. There you go. The boost gauge doesn't because it runs off of positive pressure, but and your colors will stay the same. So yeah, our diff temp cools off pretty quickly. So there we go, there's that. I'll show those one more time. That's what you get there on the sweep. The wires come through grommet for the shift cable, and then they go through that and up. It comes with 4 barbed push pins. I only used 3, and that sturdied it up because you have this screw here. If you can see that, let me shine a light on it. You got that screw there, and then you have the original screws up top. So overall, I'm pretty happy with it. It'll be nice to keep an eye on temperatures and stuff while we are pulling everything. That'll be a big plus. And cost-wise, I mean, I think GlowShift kind of had the best deal that I could find as far as this A-pillar pod. The pillar pod. And one thing I will say, you're gonna have to destroy your A-pillar trim. I wound up having to drill holes in it about this big, because the back of the gauge, once you square up the gauges where you can actually see them straight when you're sitting down, they would only go one way, and they were actually, the back of the gauge was hitting the old existing A-pillar trim, so I had to drill big old holes in that. I already drilled one hole. What's a couple more? There's not a lot of room for the wiring, so I tied into the headlight switch. You need a battery positive, you need an ignition, and then you need your headlight, and that's what dims them. So yeah, pretty awesome. I dig it. And as long as you're aware of the fact with having to drill holes in your A-pillar plastic, and maybe I did something wrong, I just couldn't see any other way to do it. There's a whole wad of wires. I wound up just running one wire and then tying all those together. I couldn't see any other way to do it, so that's what I did. And I would recommend them if I owned another Ford truck, a diesel truck or something I was towing with. For the cost and being able to pick between the 3 gauges and stuff, yeah, I would recommend it. So hey, thanks for watching.